Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining me here this morning. As Abraham mentioned, I'm Dave Anderson. I'm the United States Attorney for the Northern District of California. I want to thank and acknowledge the other participants in today's press conference who joined me here on the stage, starting over here on my left, your right, Susan Mannheimer, the Chief of the Oakland Police Department. Pat Gorman, the Special Agent in charge of the ATF here in San Francisco. Jack Bennett, Special Agent in charge of the FBI Field Office. Don O'Keefe, the United States Marshal. Mario Canton, the Special Agent in charge of the Federal Protective Service, also known as the FPS. And Assistant United States Attorneys in my office, assisting me in prosecuting this case that we're going to announce today, Garth Heyer and Katie Lloyd-Lovett. Thank you all. On May 29th, less than 3 weeks ago, at this location, the Oakland Federal Courthouse, David Patrick Underwood, a protective security officer with the FPS, was shot and murdered, and his partner was seriously injured in a drive-by shooting. We are announcing charges today against 2 defendants for the commission of this murder and attempted murder. The first defendant is Stephen Carrillo, age 32, of Ben Lomond, California. Carrillo is alleged to be the shooter on May 29th who killed Pat Underwood and injured his partner. The second defendant is Robert Alvin Justice Jr., age 30, of Millbrae, California. Justice is alleged to have been the driver of the van from which Carrillo fired his shots. Justice is also charged, as I'll describe, with aiding and abetting murder and attempted murder. Carrillo is in state custody for an incident that occurred on June 6th and that has been widely reported. Carrillo will be brought into federal custody to face these federal charges also. Justice was arrested by the FBI and taken into federal custody on Thursday, June 11th. Carrillo is charged with federal murder and attempted murder in violation of Title 18 United States Code, Section 1114. If convicted of murder, Carrillo faces a statutory maximum penalty of life imprisonment or death. If convicted of attempted murder, Carrillo faces a statutory maximum penalty of 20 years imprisonment. As I mentioned, Justice is charged with aiding and abetting the murder and attempted murder. Justice faces the same statutory maximum penalties as Carrillo. The defendants are charged in criminal complaints that will be unsealed today and made available to all of you. In a moment, I will describe to you the contents of these complaints. Before doing so, I want to emphasize that the allegations of a complaint are merely allegations, not proof. The defendants are entitled, as are we all, to the presumption of innocence. They will continue to enjoy that presumption of innocence unless or until they are proved guilty beyond any reasonable doubt. The complaint alleges as follows. On May 29th, Pat Underwood and his partner reported for duty at the guard station at the corner of Jefferson and 12th here at the Oakland Courthouse. At approximately 9:27 p.m. on that night, May 29th, a white Ford Econoline-style van parked directly across the street on Jefferson, facing the guard post from the southeast corner. The van was parked in the closest spot nearest to the intersection on the far side of the intersection. Shortly after the van parked in that location, a man later identified as Justice got out of the van and walked around the area for approximately 10 minutes in a way suggesting that he was conducting surveillance. At approximately 9:43 p.m., after Justice returned to the van headlights came on, the van came across the intersection, the side passenger door of the van opened, and as the van came into contact with the guard post, the shots were fired out of that sliding side passenger door. The gunfire killed Pat Underwood and injured his partner. Surveillance footage that was captured from cameras in the area captured the movements of the van before the shots were fired. And in the days that followed the incident, the FBI circulated images of the van in an effort to identify the defendants. On June 6th, a citizen witness discovered a white Ford van in the area of Jamison Creek Road in Ben Lomond, California. The witness observed what appeared to be ammunition, firearms, and bomb-making equipment in the van. The complaint unsealed today alleges that the van discovered in Ben Lomond on June 6th is the van that was used in the shooting in Oakland on May 29th. Evidence from the Ben Lomond van led Santa Cruz County Sheriff's Office deputies to Carrillo's home in Ben Lomond. And as the deputies approached Carrillo's home, Carillo is alleged to have fired on them, killing one deputy and injuring another. After allegedly ambushing the deputies, Carillo fled, first on foot and later by carjacking. Carillo was eventually taken into local custody. Last week, the district attorney in Santa Cruz, Jeff Roselle, charged Carillo in state court for his conduct on June 6th. I want to thank Mr. Roselle, Sheriff Jim Hart, and everyone in Santa Cruz for their cooperation. We are all safer when law enforcement works together. I want to again emphasize that the presumption of innocence attaches to the state charges as well. Meanwhile, the federal investigation established a connection between Carillo and justice. Based on that connection, the FBI began to surveil Justice. On June 11th, while the FBI had Justice under surveillance, Justice traveled to the federal building in San Francisco, met with the FBI, provided evidence of his involvement in the shooting, and was arrested. The federal complaints we are announcing today further allege as follows. An AR-15 style rifle was recovered from the area where Carillo was arrested. The complaint alleges that this AR-15 style rifle was the weapon used by Carillo in the murder of Pat Underwood and the attempted murder of his partner. Recovered from a vehicle registered to Carillo was a ballistic vest. On the ballistic vest was a patch. The patch could be described as follows. It had an American-style flag with stripes like an American flag, but with some notable differences. One difference was that in the area where the stars appear on an American flag, there was instead the picture of an igloo. And one of the stripes on the American-style flag on the patch recovered from the vehicle associated with Carillo was a Hawaiian-style motif, replacing one of the stripes on that patch. In addition, Carillo appears to have used his own blood to write phrases on one of the cars that he carjacked. The complaint alleges that the patch and the phrases written by Carillo are associated with the so-called Boogaloo movement. The Boogaloo term is used by extremists to reference a violent uprising or impending civil war in the United States. I will close my remarks with the following observations. Pat Underwood was murdered because he wore a uniform. He wore that uniform to signify his authority to protect the federal courthouse where we are gathered here today. This courthouse exists to administer justice, to uphold the rule of law, and to protect the freedoms that we all cherish. In announcing the charges today, we are reaffirming our commitment to protect those who protect us. To professional law enforcement, like the law enforcement professionals who are gathered with me here today, I offer my profound thanks. I also want to say that Pat Underwood was more than the uniform that he wore. Pat Underwood was a brother, a father, a son. He was a friend and a neighbor. There are many, many people who will miss the sound of his laughter and the sound of his voice. To the family of Pat Underwood, I offer my profound condolences. To the officer injured in the same attack that took the life of Pat Underwood, I send my wishes and prayers for a speedy recovery. I will now invite other remarks, beginning with Special Agent in Charge Jack Bennett of the FBI, and then after all of the other remarks, I'll come back to the podium to take your questions. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is John Bennett, and I am the Special Agent in Charge of FBI San Francisco. Today, I want to again offer my deepest condolences to the families of the fallen officers. We lost two law enforcement heroes this month. Patrick Underwood with the Federal Protective Service and Sergeant Damon Gutzweiler with the Santa Cruz Sheriff's Office. Their sacrifice won't ever be forgotten. Our thoughts are also with the injured victims. In Oakland, we have one FPS officer, and in Ben Lomond, we have one injured deputy Santa Cruz sheriff officer. All of these officers and deputies involved in these cases are heroes. They have dedicated their lives to protecting our communities. They all made great sacrifices and took heroic actions. Officer Underwood and Sergeant Gutzweiler made the greatest sacrifice of all, and their watch has now ended. I want to thank all the responding law enforcement in both Oakland and Ben Lomond for everything you've done to protect your community and assist the FBI with this investigation. I want to talk a little bit about the details of this case. On June 11th, 2020, FBI agents arrested Robert Justice. Charging documents were unsealed this morning, charging him with aiding and abetting the murder of Officer Underwood and attempted murder of a second federal officer. Justice had his initial appearance yesterday. Stephen Carrillo was charged this morning with the murder of Officer Underwood and attempted murder of a federal protective officer. These charges will be heard at this federal courthouse here in Oakland. We believe the 1992 white Ford cargo van recovered in Ben Lomond is the same white van that was used in the shooting at this federal building, and the same van that was used, that was issued in our BOLO, be on the lookout for. We did that for the protection of law enforcement because we felt this van was a danger to law enforcement. It is registered to Steve Carrillo's address. We believe Carillo and Justice chose this date because of the planned protest in Oakland, provided an opportunity for them to target multiple law enforcement personnel and avoid apprehension due to the large crowds attending the demonstrations. As described in detail in the complaint, we believe that Justice drove the white van that killed Officer Pat Underwood and injured another FPS officer. We believe that messages exchanged between Carillo, Justice, and others that day before the shooting in Oakland indicate a plan to travel to Oakland and attack federal law enforcement officers. To be clear, Carillo elected to travel to Oakland to conduct this murder and take advantage of a time when this nation was mourning the killing of George Floyd. There is no evidence that these men had any intention to join the demonstration in Oakland, as some in the media have asked. They came to Oakland to kill cops. This is an ongoing investigation. We will continue to look at every aspect of this case to determine any possible remaining threats to the law enforcement community or the local communities. The FBI's role in this case was the lead investigative agency here in Oakland. We contributed and surged multiple resources, including evidence response teams, numerous investigators, and our special weapons and tactics units. In Ben Lomond, we supported the Sheriff's Department, and the District Attorney Office investigation, with evidence response teams from San Francisco, Los Angeles, Phoenix, Sacramento, and Quantico, along with elements of our tactical team and bomb techs. In all cases, we had many more agents, analysts, forensic scientists dedicated from outside of our area to the successful resolution of this investigation. I want to thank the San Francisco Division's agents, analysts, and professional staff of the FBI. We are proud of your dedication and your tireless efforts in this case. These cases don't get resolved in a vacuum. Partnerships matter. And in this case, we had some of the best at our side. We want to thank the U.S. Attorney's Office for bringing forth this prosecution. The Oakland Police Department for its investigative partnership in this case in Oakland. OPD has some of the finest officers, and we are proud to stand alongside you, helping you serve and protect this city. Our homicide agents are embedded with Oakland PD to quickly assess and investigate many of the homicides that happen in this city. Our partnership is strong and critical. Together, we have resolved hundreds of shootings in the city, and together we make this city safe for its citizens. The alcohol, tobacco, and firearm, you'll hear from Pat Gorham here in a minute, for their technical expertise and their agents. The Santa Cruz Sheriff's Office, the Santa Cruz District Attorney's Office, who still leads the prosecution on the murder of Deputy Gutzweiler, California Highway Patrol, U.S. Marshal Service, Department of Homeland Security, United States Air Force, OSI, and the Federal Protective Service. Those are the ones that we always hear about, the law enforcement partners, but there are partners out there that go beyond law enforcement, and those are our private sector partners. And in this case, and in many cases, we have private sector companies that stand up and help us. Verizon, Google, Facebook, to name a few, assisted in this investigation with quickly returning legal process and ensuring and supporting our emergency disclosure orders. They share helping protecting our communities, and we thank them deeply for their help. Finally, I want to thank the public for their continued support and faith in the FBI and assisting us in locating images of the van and the subjects in this case. I'm going to end there. I'll take your questions in a few moments. However, I'll turn it over to the ATF. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Special Agent in Charge Patrick Gorman for the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, or ATF's San Francisco Field Division. First and foremost, I would like to extend ATF's deepest condolences to the family and friends of Protective Service Officer Patrick Underwood and Santa Cruz County Sheriff's Office Sergeant Damon Gutzwiller. These tragic incidents have been felt by the ATF community on a personal level. Officer Underwood protected the federal building here that some of our personnel work at each and every day. He always greeted them with a smile and spoke with them on a regular basis. We are deeply saddened by the loss of our colleagues. ATF immediately responded to these shooting incidents to make available our personnel to support our partners with the investigations into these crimes. When shooting-related investigations occur, ATF contributes every resource we can to help justice for victims, their loved ones, and the community. The collaboration of local, state, and federal, laboratory, law enforcement, and prosecutorial partners on crime gun intelligence is critical in order to identify, investigate, and prosecute shooters and the sources of their crime guns. ATF provided investigative and forensic support in these investigations. This included local special agents as well as laboratory and firearms enforcement officer resources from the greater Washington, D.C. area. ATF personnel examined firearm evidence and utilized our National Integrated Ballistic Information Network, or NIBIN, which is an important component of our crime gun intelligence model. The complaints describe the work ATF personnel performed to uncover the alleged similarities between the recovered fired cartridge cases found at the Oakland and Ben Lomond homicides. ATF's Firearms and Ammunition Technology Division determined the firearm used in these crimes was a privately made firearm with no markings or serial number. This firearm is a machine gun which had a silencer attached to its barrel. I am respectfully grateful that ATF has been able to support these investigative efforts. I am also grateful for our partnership with the agencies here today, as partnerships are the backbone of law enforcement. These senseless crimes, which resulted in the tragic loss of Patrick and Damon and caused serious injuries to others, should not have occurred. ATF will continue to make available our resources and support to our partners throughout this investigation. Again, I extend our heartfelt condolences to Patrick and Damon's families, friends, and colleagues. Thank you. And now, Oakland Chief Mannheimer.
Thank you. I'm Interim Police Chief Susan Mannheimer from the Oakland Police Department. To the family, friends, and colleagues of Patrick Underwood, Federal Protective Services Officer, we stand with you here today, all of us, as those responsible for the death of Patrick are brought to justice. This deliberate act that you heard as outlined in the allegations of the federal complaint and described fully in the investigation of the FBI clearly indicated two conspired to come to the city of Oakland in the midst of demonstrations and protests where over 500 officers from agencies far and wide were on the ground addressing demonstrations and protests and seek out and take the life of Patrick Underwood and wound his partner. When you kill and injure those who serve our community, you harm us all. Our hearts ache with you, the family, the colleagues, the Federal Protective Service, and our federal partners. We stand here with you as we stood with you that evening as that fateful incident occurred, and there were those who rushed in as we tried to secure the crime scene and render aid to one mortally wounded and one critically wounded. We will continue to stand with the family and our federal partners and mutual aid responders as we ensure that we work together to stop the violence, stop the targeting of those in uniform, and provide a safe and secure environment for our community. We are indebted to the actions you all took to bring those who would target a uniform to justice. Thank you.
That concludes the prepared remarks. We are going to take a few questions from the audience. If you would please, this is being webcast, audio only, so if you would please remember to state who you are so that the people on the other side of this understand who you are, and then state your question, and be sure to explain to whom the question is. And also, at the conclusion of this proceeding, we will have copies of the press release, copies of the complaint that has been filed, the criminal complaints that have been filed against Justice, and the complaint that has been filed against Carrillo. We will also have the ability to ask additional questions if you are here and you have a chance to look at the review the complaint. We'll have a chance to talk to a few of you. So with that, I'm going to actually turn it over to Dave Anderson to handle at least choosing people, and please do remember, state your name, state where you're from, and then ask your question. Thank you.
Okay, happy to take questions.
Okay.
Yes, Claudia, go ahead.
Claudia Cowan, Fox News Channel. Can you describe a little bit the relationship between Robert Alvin Justice and Stephen Carrillo, and also will Stephen Carrillo be tried first on the federal charges or on the state charges? Thank you.
Sure. So speaking first to the connection between Carillo and Justice, I'll confine my remarks, as you know, I'm required to do, to the allegations of the complaint. The complaint alleges a connection between the two in a couple of ways. One is that shortly before Carillo's phone was turned off at approximately 8:09 p.m. on the night of the shooting, May 29th. Shortly before that phone was turned off, it had contact with another phone number. One of the possible phone numbers that that phone had contact with was Justice. This was the basis for the initial supposition that Justice was connected in some way to this crime. There are other aspects of the complaint that talk about this connection in addition to the phone contact. The phone contact is described in paragraph 41 of the Carillo complaint. There was also text contact. That text contact is described in paragraph 51, and then as described in the complaints at paragraph 45 through 48, Justice himself provided evidence of the contact between these two individuals. And I don't think I have anything to offer by way of additional color or characterization of that contact. I would direct you back to the complaint. We expect that the federal and the state cases will proceed in parallel. Although Carillo is in state custody at the moment, we expect him shortly to come into federal custody and be available for our federal case, and then made available as necessary to continue to proceed also with the state charges on which he is also charged.
Hi Dave, Doug Sovereign, KCBS Radio.
Hey, Doug.
This is a question for you, and then also maybe for Special Agent Bennett. Can you tell us a little bit about the extent of the involvement of these two suspects with the Boogaloo movement? Whether you think there was any coordination, other people might have been involved, or were they just, fans of it, or what the level of their involvement might have been?
Yeah, sure. So the complaint doesn't speak to their level of involvement with Boogaloo, other than the evidence that I've already mentioned. There's the patch that I described to you, and then the blood writing that I mentioned that Carillo undertook on June 6th. As you'll see there in the complaint, the Boogaloo movement is described not as a defined group, but in general as adherents to an ideology that identifies as militia and shares a narrative of inciting a violent upbringing against perceived government tyranny. So by its nature, as described in the complaint, it's more a collection of symbols, more a collection of ideas than it is defined by a rigid hierarchy or organization.
So at the moment, there's nothing to suggest others might have been connected or involved. Are you willing to share at least?
I'll direct you back to Jack, and I know you wanted to get his comment also in response to your question. As Jack mentioned, the investigation continues. I won't have anything to further to add on that score.
So Jack, a follow-up along those lines for you, if I could. You did say that there was some text messaging going between Carillo, Justice, and other people. Are you pursuing other people who may have been involved in this?
This is an ongoing investigation, so you can assume we're pursuing others.
Is there a chance of other charges?
We will see where the investigation leads us. We're looking for the facts.
The other question I had is that you were looking at some news helicopter footage. Do you think you actually spotted the van on the news helicopter footage?
That was one of the partnerships I failed to mention was the press that are in this room. We did reach out and ask for footage from birds that were up that night. We have, and with the press's help going through that footage, right now I don't have the answer to that. I know we have a team looking at all the video that we collected on that, but we thank the press for their help with looking for that as well.
So I'm just to put a fine point on it, you think you may have captured the van, or you aren't sure at this point?
We're unsure at this point. We don't know where that camera was pointed, and we just wanted to make sure that we cover all the bases and we look at under every rock.
Thank you.
Did you want to address just the connection with the
It's an ongoing investigation on that, and the facts of this investigation that we're talking about is the murder of a federal protective officer and the murder of a sheriff's officer. So that is what we're here talking about today.